Have you ever witnessed a friendship so real, so effortless, that it could light up an entire theater? Tonight, we step into the quiet magic of Paul Newman and Robert Redford, two legends whose bond reshaped Hollywood and still warms the heart, decades on.
Well, that ought to do it.
There are Hollywood pairings that sell tickets, and then there are pairings that change the weather. In the late 1960s, Paul Newman was already a household name, the cool hand with a smile that could disarm a room. A craftsman whose talent traveled lightly because grace was his instrument. Robert Redford, by contrast, was the bright new comet, handsome in a way that felt almost democratic. The golden boy, who looked like America's favorite son, but played men with complicated shadows. What happened when they met on screen was alchemy, a rare alignment of timing, temperament, and trust. The story begins, of course, with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969. Casting wasn't inevitable. Studio minds circled bigger names and safer bets. Steve McQueen came close, and there were swirlings about other titans of the era. Accounts from the period describe push-pull negotiations over billing and stardom, and how director George Roy Hill and Paul Newman ultimately stood behind Redford, despite pressure to land a flashier marquee. In more than one retelling, Newman's vote of confidence mattered. He wanted a partner, not a rival, and he saw that partner in Redford. The pairing paid off like a miracle no one could counterfeit. Newman's Butch was Quicksilver, witty, compassionate, and slyly philosophical. Redford's Sundance was the steely countermelody coiled rye, the deadeye who rarely wasted a word. Together, they invented a modern buddy picture language, ironic but never cynical, playful but never cheap. Two men bound by loyalty in an era when the West itself was fading like daylight after supper. Audiences didn't just buy tickets, they bought into a friendship. Butch Cassidy became the top-grossing film of 1969 and later a Library of Congress selection for the National Film Registry, recognized as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. It's Burt Bacharach's score and that wistful bicycle interlude, Under Raindrops Keep, Fallin' on My Head, became part of American memory. To bottle lightning once is luck, to do it twice is legacy. In 1973, the duo reunited for The Sting, a con man Valentine to the underdog, wrapped in ragtime. The movie didn't just succeed, it swept the culture, winning 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for George Roy Hill. Redford himself earned a Best Actor nomination. If Butch Cassidy set the standard for the buddy film, The Sting proved the chemistry was no mirage. It was a durable alloy, strong enough to carry a caper, a friendship, and an era. The joy of The Sting isn't merely in the twist, it's in the company. Watch Newman's laughter lift Redford's half smile, or the way Redford's focus quiets the room so Newman can go mischievous. It's a duet, not a duel. And in that duet, a generation of moviegoers found something larger than plot. They found companionship, the kind that makes Sunday afternoons at the movies feel like church, where reverence and delight share the same pew.
He's not as tough as he thinks. Neither are we.
Paul Newman is Henry Gondorff. There wasn't a con he couldn't run, and there wasn't a sucker he couldn't get.
Off camera, they played like brothers, pranks, light jabs, and the kind of wordless shorthand old friends used to pass the salt across a lifetime. Over the years, stories surfaced, birthday jokes that escalated, gifts with a wink, and that quiet, stubborn loyalty that never made headlines because it didn't need to. Redford would later call Newman the best friend I ever had, a sentence that lands with the simplicity of truth. They weren't saints, they were men who kept each other honest. The jokes made the work lighter. The respect made the work last. It's easy to freeze Paul Newman in that perfect frame. Blue eyes narrowed against the sun, a line hanging on the lip like a dare. But the camera never got all. He was a craftsman, as attentive to the muscles of a character as a mechanic to an engine. From the hustler to cool hand Luke, he mapped the modern American male's charm and conscience.
Where do you come from? California, Oakland.
Then there was the life beyond the soundstage. Newman the racer, chasing speed with the same ethical neatness he brought to his lines. Newman the husband, in a partnership with Joanne Woodward that was both sanctuary and compass, and Newman the philanthropist, whose experiment with a bottle of salad dressing became Newman's Own, a company that donates 100% of profits to help kids. Since 1982, the foundation has given over $600 million to good causes, camps for seriously ill children, nutrition education, and community programs that dignify lives. He used celebrity as a lever, not a mirror. There's a reason older Americans feel a special affection for Newman. It isn't just the movies, it's that comforting sense that character, the old-fashioned kind, still mattered to someone who could have gotten by on charm alone. He didn't, he gave it away. Redford's early image, the tousled hair, the chiseled jaw, the baseball cap grin, was an airplane ticket to any role in the draw. He could have lived there forever, a postcard of American handsomeness, but the man refused the easy route and went deeper. He grew into one of the most quietly transformative figures in American film, not only as an actor in standards like All the President's Men and The Way We Were, but as a director and movement builder. His first film behind the camera, Ordinary People, 1981 Best Picture, and Redford won the Academy Award for Best Director. The film's gentleness and psychological precision surprised people who thought they knew him. He'd always had the goods. Now he showed the courage to use them differently. Then came the legacy that may outlast all the rest. In 1981, Redford founded the Sundance Institute, a haven for independent voices and risk-taking storytellers. From those snowy labs and the film festival that grew around them, whole careers launched. The list reads like a syllabus of modern cinema. Steven Soderbergh, Quentin Tarantino, Ava DuVernay, Chloe Zhao, Ryan Coogler, and so many others. Redford didn't merely open a door. He built the house where different kinds of stories could find heat and light. He matched that cultural work with environmental advocacy, not the performative sort, but the patient kind that doesn't care whether the cameras are rolling. He spoke for wild places, for clean air and water, for intergenerational stewardship. It's fitting that environmental leaders mourned him not just as a star, but as a champion. Paul Newman passed in 2008, and many of us remember the quiet that followed. It felt like the end of something warm and decent that had been humming underneath our culture for half a century. Redford carried that absence with dignity, still working, still building, still lending his name to causes that needed more than applause. In September 2025, Robert Redford died at 89. The tributes arrived like letters from old friends we hadn't seen in years. Colleagues remembered the steady hand, the listening face, the way he could lift a young artist with a few sincere words. Newsrooms and film lovers looked past the cheekbones and found the architect, the teacher, the citizen. He had been everything the headlines said, and a few things that headlines don't know how to measure. For those of us of a certain vintage, the news wasn't just a headline. It was a time machine, and it took us back to matinees and drive-ins, to cassette boxes labeled in careful handwriting, to Sunday nights when TV stations still ran old movies as if they were old hymns. We remembered laughter rising in a dark theater when Butch and Sundance tumbled into the water and came up laughing. We remembered the elegant pleasure of a Khan well played in The Sting, and how Newman and Redford didn't steal our wallets. They stole our hearts, fair and square. The older we get, the more we appreciate the varieties of courage. One kind shows up when you're 29, and the camera is close enough to count your eyelashes. You learn to be yourself anyway. Another kind shows up when the lights are off. You learn to be for others. Paul Newman's courage was to turn the accident of fame into an engine for good. He built a funnel from celebrity to charity, and then did the unromantic work of keeping it running. Redford's courage was to turn a personal reputation into a platform for voices outside the gates. To say to a kid with a script and a prayer, "Come in. Let's see what you've got." Between them, they mapped the high road for artists with consciences. Listen closely to their two films together, and you can hear the friendship. It's in the timing of a joke that lands a fraction of a second earlier than the script suggests. It's in a glance that says, "Your turn," and in the reflex that responds, "Got it." I often tell younger viewers, you don't have to know the backstory to feel it. Chemistry like that radiates through the screen. Even their mischief had meaning. It kept the work human. It kept success from turning into altitude sickness. It's hard to overstate how rare that is in a business that can inflate and devour egos before lunch. They made humility look like fun. For our audience, many of you who grew up with these films, the Newman Redford films, are more than nostalgia. They are a reminder of what American movies used to promise. Intelligent entertainment that respected your time, your wit, and your hope. You weren't being sold a brand. You were being invited into a story. That promise is still alive wherever you can find an honest performance and a director who loves people more than pyrotechnics. It's alive in independent theaters that smell faintly of coffee and new carpeting. In streaming menus where, if you're patient, you'll discover a film with good bones. And it's alive in the work of the filmmakers whom Redford Sundance helped to launch. The ones who still carry a little of his stubborn belief that the story matters most. Yesterday, I did what many of you have done this past week. I poured a cup of coffee, turned off the news, and spent a day with Butch, Sundance, and the gang. I started with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and then queued up The Sting in both. I felt the same thing I felt as a kid, that particular American light of good company. The frames are older now, and so am I, but the laughter hasn't aged a day. Watching anew, I noticed details I'd missed. The way Newman's Butch keeps a joke in his back pocket for mercy. The way Redford's Sundance listens when there's nothing to shoot. How he gives the scene oxygen. And then, during The Sting, I laughed at a con I knew was coming. Because the pleasure isn't in the surprise anymore. It's in watching artists at play. When the credits rolled, I thought about how rare it is to feel both entertained and restored. That's their gift. So, what do we keep from the short list of their shared filmography? 2 titles, both imperishable. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969. The day friendship became a genre. The Western turned melancholy and modern. And America learned to love 2 charming outlaws, headed toward a sunset we could all see coming. The Sting, 1973. The high-wire con, in which the house finally loses. And we get to cheer for the elegance of clever men who refuse to be small. If you're keeping score, 7 Oscars, Best Picture, and Redford nominated for Best Actor. A short list, yes, but a long echo. And that echo runs through the private lives they chose to lead when the press lights were pointed elsewhere. They taught us that handsomeness without humor is a bore, and humor without heart is a cheat. They taught us that charity doesn't need a trumpet, it needs a checkbook and a plan. Newman's had both. They taught us that power in the arts isn't for hoarding, it's for sponsoring. Redford built rooms where strangers could become artists. And they taught us that even in a business famous for temporary loves, friendship can persist, rough edges and all, if you prize the work more than the mirror. To those of you who remember seeing these films when they were new, I honor the lives you've lived in the years since, and the way these movies have marched beside you. To those discovering them now, welcome. You've made 2 good friends today. If you keep a shelf of discs or a folder of favorites, put these 2 side by side. When you need the comfort of smart company, let them in. They'll take off their hats, tip you a joke, and remind you gently that style is what remains when youth has caught its bus home. Paul Newman left in 2008. Robert Redford left in September 2025. The house lights are up. The theater's nearly empty, and the usher is sweeping the aisle. But if you close your eyes, you can still hear them. Butch and Sundance. Henry and Johnny, 2 friends, laughing on their way into the dark. Still making mischief, still taking care of each other. We won't see their like again. We don't need to. We still have the films. If this journey into a golden friendship stirred a good memory, I'd love to travel a little farther with you. Subscribe to Memory Lane Media and visit our Hollywood Legends playlist. Beginning with our farewell to Robert Redford, and continuing with this tribute to Paul Newman and Robert Redford together. Next time, we'll explore another story where artistry and character walk side by side, because some lights never go out. Thank you for watching, and for keeping the good company.